and welcome to Game Brain, a board game podcast about our gaming group. I'm your host, Tom Donnelly, and ladies and gentlemen, we are in round 13, turn 10, if you can believe it, and I am here with the only person with a deeper voice than mine. The professor is here. Elder, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So please adjust your bass levels today because it's going to be deep. How are things going, Elder? How are you doing? You are still on the other coast, correct?
I am. I'm still on the East Coast, but in the transition, it's happening. We got our place, our new house, beautiful house in Inglewood. Nice. We signed the lease. We're renting it.
Nice.
My sister moved in this week, and then, I think November, the first week of November is the target date for us all to be out there in a new spot. So
yes,
he is
going to be back.
Yes,
it hasn't been the same without you, man. It has not been the same without you.
I've definitely missed you guys, and seeing the message go out every week for game night, and
just in the hopes that maybe you're in town this week. You never know. Elder gets around. I'll hear things like, "Hey, did you see Elder yesterday?" I'm like, "What do you mean? He's in Philadelphia?" "Oh no, he's in town." Hey, what? You are hopping around the country for sure. So it'll be great to have you back in town. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh. Got some doggies in the background. Okay, we'll handle that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking today about an absolute classic. We're going to be talking about the 2011 release, Castles of Burgundy, probably the most famous game by the designer Stefan Feld, I should say, and many consider to be his masterpiece. And Elder, you are probably the biggest Feld head we have in our group, right?
Probably, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, I'm pretty big Feld fan, although not as much as before. I think Lacerda has kind of taken his place, and I think there's a couple other designers I might be more into now. But
100%. Though, as we talked recently, we talked about how he's having a little bit of a renaissance, right? Stefan Feld has got some really good games out recently.
Yeah. Like I was kind of really cool on Feld, and then Bonfire came out like a year ago.
Yep.
And I was really into that game for a while. Got mini plays online on TTS of Bonfire. And was there another Feld that came out that was kind of impressive?
Yes, there was. Let me see.
I mean, it was Castles of Tuscany.
Yes,
which is I guess a spiritual, what do you call that, successor to Castles of Burgundy?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah,
is what it was. I'm trying to think of the other game, the recent game that he had. It was, looking at it, Carpe Diem was pretty good. Forum Trajanum was pretty good, and then of course he re-implemented Bruges and Macau, his older games, and made them into Hamburg and Amsterdam. So. He's been busy of late, for sure. And then Elder and I are going to talk about forgotten classics, those games that started us on our journey that just don't seem to make it to the table anymore. I'm really looking forward to that. Well then, let us get right into game night. Elder, I know that you are involved in multiple real estate transactions. You're buying and selling like you're in Monopoly. So, have you been playing anything of late?
Not a whole lot. So the new Tashini game. I think it's a T game. I guess Tabanusi.
Yep.
For some reason, well, so a couple weeks ago, I looked at, the Ellen, the Essen, one of the geek lists of the Essen games that are coming out.
Yep.
And identified about 4 games that really kind of caught my eye on the list, and this was one of them. Voidfall is another one.
Sure.
And then Jennifer put out her list, which was pretty much right on target with my list.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been so busy still. I mean, last several months with work and everything. I'm purposely trying to calm things down a little bit as we're getting towards the end of the year and get more focused. So I feel like in a way, a tiny bit of space has opened up. But for whatever reason, I was excited about this game. Downloaded the rules, saw it on TTS, and learned the rules. It's like the first time I learned a new game in probably over a year now, I would think. Probably since Darwin's Journey, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Was the last game that I learned and was playing a lot online. But yeah, learned this one, played it with Jen and her friend Lorna.
Mm-hmm.
Had a blast, learning a new game. And yeah, been thinking about it. It's definitely like, my game on the brain as well.
Good.
So excited to try it again. And then had to play, a refresher game of, even though I've played it tons of times before, more than I could count, Castles of Burgundy over the years.
We could have done the review without playing it this week, but we played it this week anyway, just to be completist and make sure we're not missing anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wanted to have it just really fresh in my mind. And so, yeah, and I hadn't played the board game arena implementation yet, which they do a really great job. It's just so
didn't they
efficient. Yeah.
100%.
It's really, yeah, they do a great job on that site. So yeah, played it on there. It's funny when you know a game that well,
mm-hmm.
but you haven't played it in a while,
mm-hmm.
and then it's like it's a different sensation in my game brain from learning a new game and having the pieces fall together.
Yes.
Than kind of remembering a game that you know really well, but it's still kind of like a pleasing sensation where you're like, I remember this now. Okay, all right.
It's like have a chance interaction, a chance meeting with your high school girlfriend, and you're like, oh man, we had such good times. You're pretty awesome. That's just wonderful. Oh my goodness. Oh, do you remember that time we did that? Oh, that's so great. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's awesome.
Okay, you took it to a whole other place.
That's what it is for me. That's what the experience is for me. Now I've played Burgundy fairly recently. Played it a couple times this year actually. And it's definitely one of those games where every time I play it again, I'm like, oh, it's such a good game. Oh my God. Yeah. Why don't we bring this out more often? But one of the reasons we're going to talk about it today is first of all, we are going back and, we've done El Grande, we've done Agricola. We've decided that while we're still in the pandemic, while the global supply chain is still working itself out, it's a great opportunity to shine the spotlight on some of the absolute classics that a lot of people that are newer to the hobby might never have encountered, and bring that to them. And especially now that Board Game Arena, definitely the best place online to play games, has a great implementation of Castles of Burgundy. So that's going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. For me, again, for game night, we played Castles of Burgundy earlier in the week. I played Twilight Struggle and Terraforming Mars earlier in the week. And at the official game night, we had 8 folks with us, and 4 of them played Imperial Steam to good reviews again. A little, it was Trey, Jennifer, Michael from Game Night, and Matt Patterson were playing that, and they all seem to really like it. They, whenever Trey plays a game. The conversation afterwards is, what would I change? What are some things that not necessarily change, but what are some things that might be points that we need to explore more in future plays? So I love the way Trey's mind works as far as that stuff goes. It's really, really cool seeing him just kind of lifting up the hood and looking at how the engine works and saying, is this something we need to hit harder, try at a different angle, or is this something that maybe isn't our favorite element of this thing? But on the whole, Imperial Steam over here has been getting some raves. People are really, really enjoying that game. And then the other four of us, we played Furnace, which I'll talk about more in Games on the Brain, but it's a 1 hour engine builder, which I love the idea of a 1 hour engine builder. So we'll talk later about what Furnace means to me, what I think about it. We played Babylonia. If you play a 1 hour game, what do you do with the rest of your night? Especially with a learning game, it's actually an hour and a half. So we brought out Babylonia, and that was another hour, and then we finished the game because Dimitri was in our group, and we're trying to be nicer to Dimitri now. I'm not really sure why. I don't think it'll last, but for right now, we're trying to be nicer to Dimitri. So we brought out Tichu, and we played a great game of Tichu, and Dimitri and Mike Kananak smoked me and Brian in that game. So it was a fun game night. We had a really good time there. And I thought for a minute Candace was gonna make an appearance, but she was at a bridal not bridal shower, a rehearsal dinner for a wedding happening this weekend. I told her to skip it, but she didn't. So what can you do?
Yeah, priorities.
Exactly what I said to her. Well, what can you do? Let's say we get to the news, sir.
All right.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America, and all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press. Come on.
For card game fans, Lord of the Rings, the card game, is widely considered one of the best ever made. It is a fantastic game. Well, guess what? Fantasy Flight announced a revised core set, brand new core set that is revised, that is tweaked. This game has such a huge following. People are crazy about it. And when they reintroduce the core set, really what they're doing is they're learning everything. The great thing about these CCGs, and I don't know if it's a CCG or if it's TCG. I frankly, do you know the difference between all of those, and do you know which one Lord of the Rings is?
I don't actually. I'm not so much my world at all.
Got it.
I kind of know what a collectible card game is, but the other stuff, like what is it, living card game, and
and tradable card game, TCG. Right. My understanding is that the CCGs are the ones where they're just trying to get you to spend as much money as possible and all that sort of stuff, and the TCGs and the living card games are the ones where when you buy the set, you have basically everything you're going to need for a long time, and only sparingly do they introduce new sets and new elements to it. I think that's mainly the distinction. People are screaming into their headphones right now, like, how do you not know? You run a gaming podcast. How do you not know this? Including Trey and Matt probably. But what can you do? Anyway, you should definitely check out, if you wanted to get into this hobby, or if you already are into this side of the hobby, Lord of the Rings card game is supposed to be fantastic. Revised core set is out now. Next up, PAX Unplugged, the convention, has announced that they're requiring vaccines for all attendees. Everybody's got to be vaccinated if you want to go to PAX. I'm a big fan. Trey and I are going to be going to the BGG Con in Dallas in November, and I got to say I am a little, it's going to be a lot of people indoors, and that's always a little bit of a concern. And policies like this definitely give me a lot more peace of mind for that kind of thing. Have you been hanging out in indoor spaces with a bunch of other people? I mean, you really can't, right?
No, I actually have. If the reports are true. I was spotted in L.A. A couple weeks ago, because my nonprofit Tech Lemert had its annual conference, and I was on the gaming panel. So
there you go.
So we did that, and we had all our protocols in place and so forth for that. And then just this past week, for work, my work sent me to Las Vegas for the G2E show, which is the big annual slot machine expo that they have every year. So so those are the two kind of like, two conventions or events, that I went to in the last couple of weeks.
What are the new hot slots coming out this year?
Oh gosh. Probably the most impressive thing I saw was, it's really these displays, the LCD screens and the amount of pixels that they're putting on the screen now, and the graphics quality is just like insane, and how big the screens are. And they had this, one of the companies, Scientific Games, has this Willy Wonka license, and they've done some amazing Willy Wonka, like from the first one. It's such a great license for slot machines. Just the way that they're utilizing it. And it had just this great, like, not super realistic, but just very kind of like almost like wax figure real model, 3D model of Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka.
Sure.
Like as the idol, kind of like doing this kind of like subtle little idol thing that looked amazing.
Wow.
And then they had this feature where like the reels just grow. That's the new thing in slot machines now, is like, the reels just keep growing. So the taller they grow, the more chances you have to win, right? Because there's more symbols on the screen.
Right. Yeah. Instead of 3x3, it becomes 5x5 or 5x7 and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, this game had like 5x50, like literally the reel shot all the way up to the ceiling. It was insane. I never saw anything like it.
But when I look at that, I can't even interpret what I'm looking at, right? It's drawing these crazy lines across the board and stuff like that, and I just got to be like, well, it's a chip. There's a chip in there, and that chip is supposed to not give me anything except very rarely, and not give me a lot except very rarely. So at a certain point, the bigger those things get, the more smoke and mirrors it seems, right? It's like, okay, you're showing me all this stuff, but it all amounts to very, very little at the end of the day. So I don't know about those. I don't know.
Yeah.
Tough to say, but yeah. Last time I was in Vegas, I definitely noticed the games, the slots were leaving the realm of these narrow alleys with a lot of sound and not too much light, and they were becoming spectacles. Like you were moving through it, and it felt like Times Square, because you have these big lit up displays with all sorts of stuff going on, and it's a really good advertising campaign because it kind of draws you in. Yeah,
and again, like this, even this is a relatively small company that I work for compared to the big Scientific Games and the other big guys that are out there, IGT. But even you're using game engines now to develop these games, so it's a completely the games went from mechanical to kind of like almost like Flash style animation, to now they're like fully 3D with like game rendered visual effects, and like you said, it's just all about the spectacle.
Yeah. But there's still, but the basics of it are still the same, right? It's still there. There is no real choice you have except deciding how much money you're putting on each spin, right?
Exactly. And again, that does the way some of the math models work. Yes, the more you wager, the more chance you have to win a larger amount.
Right.
But the percentages are set, by state law and jurisdiction. So there's rules to, how much each one of these machines is going to pay out.
Right.
Yeah.
So loosest slots in Vegas, forget about it. All right. It's like, you're paying for the carpeting no matter what.
Yeah. Somehow you're going to pay.
Exactly. Speaking of pay and prize and payouts, the first ever World Series of Board Gaming event has been announced.
Dude, I'm looking at this. I just missed it. Like I was there the 5th, and this was over on the 2nd of October.
Next year.
Oh, it's next year. Okay,
Yes.
I haven't missed it yet.
2022.
Okay,
no, it'll be a year away. That would have been crazy if you were basically almost there at the same time. So Las Vegas in 2022 at Bally's, they're going to have from September 28th to October 2nd. They're going to have the World Series of Board Gaming. People are going to be competing for the gold rings, which means you are the champion of this game or that game. And there's going to be a championship prize of $25,000. Preliminary rounds, there'll be 16 rounds, initial rounds. Will be starting on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Anyway, what do you think about this, Elder? Because the initial feeling that I get when I look at an announcement like that, and what I feel after I think about it for even just a moment, are very, very different for me. What do you think about this whole thing?
Well, I love tournaments. I love gaming. Like, again, I love all kinds of games. Board games are probably my favorite, but I love pinball,
Sure.
I love poker, and I just love any kind of structured play. So this makes me very excited. I mean, my first reaction was, well, they're saying this is the first, but that's not actually true, right? Like they're like up in Allentown or something for years. They've been having a World Series of board games, right?
Well, the WBC, the World Board Gaming Championships.
Oh,
so
okay, so that's distinct.
That's the WBC. So they're calling this the World Series of Board Games. So they're just creating a different name for it. But the WBC, to my knowledge, does not have a $25,000 grand prize. There is not.
Right.
There's not money on the line at the WBC, as far as I know.
Right. Yeah, it's just like kind of plaques, and like I think I've seen the plaques. They're like very kind of middle school.
Yeah, exactly.
A bunch of these things, and
relatively
just really
understated.
For bragging rights.
Exactly. You just want to know that you're the I don't even know what to say. But so my first thought was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I will definitely want to be there. I want to go to that and things like that. And then like it took about 2 minutes for me to just process what all of that means. And then I'm like, oh, no, this is going to draw the weenies. This is going to be just just imagine this playing board games. What happens if somebody, when there's money on the line, everybody's watching everybody to make sure nobody cheats or accidentally gets one more clay than they're supposed to get. And what are the games going to be? Are they're not going to be the great games, right? They're going to be the standard, more widespread games. I hear that Blood Rage is going to be one of the games, which is an interesting choice to put on that, right? I just like when I think about listen, when we go to our local con, right, to Strategic Con,
right.
Do you ever play in any of the tournaments?
I have, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but it's been a long. You do not spend your days playing tournaments there for the most part, right?
No.
The majority of your time is in open gaming, playing for nothing but hanging out with friends and playing games, right?
Yeah, typically that's the better situation, and again, it really depends on the. It's not at the con. For me, it's not so much about playing in a tournament. Like again, although I do love tournament style gameplay,
sure.
It's more about what is the game.
Yes.
Because I really am going to the con to play the coolest games I can with my friends.
100%.
So if again, nothing's going on in open gaming and a bunch of my friends are playing the whatever tournament, or if it's one of my favorite games, like if there's a Gallerist tournament, I'm playing the Gallerist tournament.
Yeah, I guess my thought at the end of the day is that to some degree, when you're playing board games for money, a key component of what makes board games great kind of dies on the vine. To some extent, not to a huge extent, but to some extent. That said, if they have Democker or Diplomacy at the World Series of Board Gaming, I think I'm going to be in Vegas.
Yeah, you're playing. Yeah, if Dimocker's in there, you're going to the World Series. Absolutely, you're at the final table for that.
I don't know if I'll be at the final table, but I know that'll be. I know they'll be there with bells on. So we will see. So anyway, there it is, the World Series of Board Gaming event, and I'm glad that you brought up the WBC, because if you didn't, I was going to. There already is a World Board Gaming Championship. I have never been. Yeah, I haven't heard great reports from it. I haven't heard that it's as amazing as the idea of it sounds. But yeah, it's out in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and if that's something you might be interested in, check that one out as well.
I got to. Can I just say one more thing on
please,
this?
Of course.
So this totally does make me think though of again, depending on the game and the structure, there can be a lot of drama. Like it could be cool. Like it's possible. Like I totally get what you're saying as well.
Sure.
And yeah, Blood Rage, Ra, these are some kind of interesting choices. Seven Wonders. But 1 year at what's the big one we go to with the Gen Con?
Gen Con. Yeah.
Gen Con. Our friend David Zevin is world-class Catan player, right?
Big time.
And he made it to I think it was the finals of Catan 1 year, and I was on the rail watching him play at the final table, the finals at Gen Con, playing Catan, like watching him, everybody at the table be pissed at him because he's, doing his shtick to try to make these trades in a Catan game. And I got to tell you, dude, it was pretty intense. Like it was an amazing, there was cameras there and everything. And I was just like, wow, like this is like the height of, tournament play and our hobby, like in Euro games. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, and oh my God, go to a Magic the Gathering tournament, and holy cow, that is, these people are getting they're getting massages, they're working with life coaches before their next round, and like it's crazy, the level of competitiveness that goes in there. I guess there's just something for me that. Like I'm drawn to it, but I'm also repulsed by it. There's a little bit of both in me for it, because I've seen when it goes bad, but I've also back in the day, back in the early '90s, Trey and I were fixtures at the Diplomacy tournament, right? We would play in the before Settlers of Catan was even invented. We were playing tournament board games.
Right.
So,
but were you playing for money though? And
no,
Diplomacy?
No,
okay.
No. Just for the title of the board game, the Diplomacy Champion of Los Angeles, which both Trey and I are. We won on consecutive years. Yeah, no one's ever taken that away from us. Cole Worley has said that his company Leader Games was looking for a new title. What's the next thing that they're working on? And they've announced what it's going to be. We don't know much about it yet, but it's called ARCS, ARCS, Collapse and Conflict in the Void. And looking at the initial artwork I see from it, it is definitely space themed. It looks kind of space opera-y. It looks somewhere between, I would say, Cowboy Bebop and Star Wars is what it looks like, and that's got me kind of excited. I like that. I would love to see Cole Worley with his style of gaming. I would love to see him in the sci-fi genre and see what he can do with it. A science fiction themed Oath sort of system, or or any of his other titles like that. I'm not sure I want to see John Company in space, but Root in space could be really interesting. And yeah, let's keep an eye on Arcs when it comes out. New to Kickstarter is a game called Mythwind. Mythwind has a pledged goal of $80,000. It's already at $660,000, so it's doing great, and it's still got 22 days to go. But it is a persistent world, asymmetrical, cooperative game where we are pioneers in a whimsical fantasy world. So let's see what we can talk about this game. We can say that one thing is that it is interesting thing about it is that it's low fantasy. Now there's high fantasy and low fantasy. When we talk about low fantasy, we talk about something that is a little closer to the medieval era and a little less focused on magic and dragons and that sort of stuff. So if you look at the character roles, you have Crafter, who is a person that makes things and makes very fancy things. Farmer is a role that you can play. Merchant is a role you can play. Woodsman. So as you can tell, these are all professions that you would see in a normal game. And what you're doing in the game is you are building villages, and you're building aspects of villages. And what you're building is actually going to be driving the story, because there's a pretty strong story aspect to the game, and it is cooperative. You are playing against the game to some degree. There are adventure cards that will come out. There are goal cards. There are secret envelopes, and I think this is one that is worth checking out, taking a look at. What did you think when you looked at the basic setup for this?
I think it's very intriguing. Like, I like the classes. Again, I'm not a big co-op guy, like in terms of games, or like these story games where you flip to a page and then you read the thing. I've done a couple of them before.
Sure.
Like most things, they're really dependent on who you play with, and I think how good the story is, right? Like it kind of brings up this idea of like, okay, well, is the creators of this, are their design skills a match for their story skills, storytelling skills, right? And then again, it's interactive story, right? Or it's like you're the players are driving the story, so it's not like you're reading a novel or watching a scripted piece of media, something like that. So I think it's tricky to get these things right, and I haven't had the experience yet where I was just like, oh wow, like I haven't played a game where I was like, oh, the mechanics of this were amazing, and it had this incredible story too that I really felt like I was invested in, and my character was really making an impact on the story. Like, I haven't had that experience yet. It might have been out there. I know a lot of people are like crazy into Gloomhaven. I know I might get flack for this, but I'm not super impressed with Gloomhaven. I didn't have like a tremendous amount of fun when we played the sessions. It was okay.
All right. Do you have a dedicated mailbox for hate mail? Because if you do,
it's coming. I know it's coming.
Yeah, just let me know where to send it, because I don't want to just get it at the main Game Brain address. We have a limited amount of storage space there. So just tell everybody your email address so that we can make sure that they go directly to you. No, I know exactly what you mean, and being a storyteller, like that's for 27 years now, that's my career, right? That's how I make my living. Storytelling is hard, and storytelling when you have other competing agendas like gameplay is even harder. And having written story for video games, I know exactly how hard it is. It is extraordinarily hard, and and I kind of agree with you. I don't think that I can't point to a board game that has been able to do both completely successfully, right? There have been great games with good story. There have been good games with great story. I've never seen a great game with great story yet, and so that's the challenge. But that said, I think there is growth happening, right? I think that people are getting better at designing these, and more of these are coming out in the market, and eventually somebody is going to stand on the shoulder of giants, and they're going to create something truly unique and original. I like the cut of the jib of this game. I will say I like how they are. It doesn't feel generic, right? I have a big anti-generic fantasy filter, right? And fantasy is a hard thing. I've said many times, a hard thing for me to interface with. I kind of interface with this. This kind of works for me. This is creating a world that feels lived in and doesn't feel like it's trading on tropes too much. So I would like to see where this goes. Let's say that we have about 20 some odd days left in the Kickstarter. And, let's get to the nitty gritty. The nitty gritty is that the core box is 105 Canadian dollars. That's about 85 US. But if you want the Expanded Horizons expansion, which allows the game to be played with up to 5 players, then you're looking at $117. If you want the magical miniatures, that's $141. These games get expensive very quickly. So take a look at it and see if it might be something that you want to back. I will tell you that I don't think I'm going to back it, but I can tell you for sure I am going to be keeping my ear to the ground about this one. And this is something that I look forward to if the buzz on it is good enough, something that I plan on picking up later.
Yep. This is one that I wouldn't back it. I could if the right group of people said, "Hey, you want to chip in on this, Elder, and we'll play it." I would consider that. But I definitely would want to try it. I'm curious enough, like it looked interesting enough that I definitely would want to try it out. And I like a couple other things that the guys were saying where you don't have to play the same role each time. You can kind of switch roles.
Yeah, that's a cool addition, right?
Yeah, other people could come in and out, and then there's this whole concept of infinite gameplay, whatever that means, right? Like, you could argue any game you can play infinitely.
Well, yeah, I think probably that's talking about legacy games, and legacy games are specifically designed so that you can't actually keep playing them, right?
Right.
So it's like, nope, not that. You're not tearing up anything. You're not putting stickers on the board so that you can't play the game again. And there's not secrets that once revealed, there's no game left.
Right.
But at least that's what they're saying. Is that going to be true? We're not sure. One last thing.
But it is persistent though, right? Where
yes.
it has this kind of cool thing where they have these kind of in-cut things on the board.
Yep.
Where the promise is you're making these persistent changes in the game, and then you can kind of pack it up and play as many sessions as you want, which is kind of like a RPG, traditional pencil and paper, and then you can take it out of the box and it'll be ready to go the next time.
Yeah, they did say setup is very quick on this one, which in these types of games is a feature. That's a big feature because sometimes the setup on these can be interminable. Yeah. One last one that just kind of came across. I just came across is a game called Gutenberg, which is a board game that is going to be about making a printing press. Pre-sales are going to start in about 4 days. You can go to Board Game Geek and look up Gutenberg, the board game. It's going to be about a 2-hour game. It's Polish designers. The Poles have been putting out some really good games this year. And having looked into it, here's a couple interesting things. First of all, there is hidden action selection where you are behind a screen. You are choosing. You have these cubes, and you're choosing not only which actions you're going to take this round, but the strength of those actions. Like you can go up to 5. You can put up to 5 cubes in one action to gain strength. And among the things you're getting by taking those actions is you're getting ink, you're getting planning cards, you're getting specialty cards, you're getting wooden 3D fonts. You're getting all sorts of things that you need to do the printing, and then you're getting gears. And on your player mat, you have space for 3 gears. and by putting them there, you are rotating the gears in such a way that you are unlocking chained actions, which looks pretty darn interesting, I have to say. I'm really kind of intrigued. If the game works, this could be, this has some of my favorite mechanics in it, and it looks really quite interesting. So, and I love that. I just love the theme. I love the printing press theme and the wooden fonts that you're then putting on these cards in order to fulfill orders. Just looks pretty cool. So we'll have to check that out. Shall we get to games on the brain? Elder, is Tabanusi the game on your brain right now?
Yeah, pretty much. Again, like I said, it's been a while since I learned something. So, yeah, after the first play, like definitely the first time through, it felt like it was a little hard to pull these levers the way you want them to go. And so, yeah, I'm definitely anxious to get another game and to see if I can get kind of better control the second time around, and kind of get to some kind of sense of what's a good score in this game.
Now, this is a game in the T series of games, right? With Tawanitsu and all that sort of stuff. How would you say it compares so far through your initial play? How does it compare to the others in the series?
Well, it's dice drafting, so it was a little bit of like Takeno, like had a little bit of that feel, but not really very much because it plays so differently. There was these different sections, but it's really about, again, first playthrough. It's about kind of juggling these, like, the sequence of when you build stuff and then just maximizing, all of your actions and there's some target goals. There's like some goals on the table that like everybody can do. And then, you have like a personal goal you can go after. So you're just kind of, trying to get it's like one of those games where you feel like you got to do a little bit of everything, but you can't possibly, like, you have to kind of balance it all out.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds pretty good. I mean,
interesting choices.
All of the T games so far have been very interesting to me.
Yeah.
They may not be my favorite games in the world, but they're all very well made and very interesting games for sure. And for me, Furnace is the game on my brain. Furnace is a very interesting game. I love... So at this point of my hobby, I am looking for games that, like, I don't need... How do I put this? Here's how I put this. A 4-player max, 2.5 hour game. In order for that to have a place in my collection, it's got to be pretty special because I've got a lot of really good games that play in that amount of time with that amount of player count, right? And in order to get it to the table, it's to some degree got to compete for headspace with all of those other games. But when there are games that have an odd player count or an odd time to play, that has a lot more attraction to me because my situation gets a lot thinner in those areas. And for me, the filler game of a half hour or 40 minutes, something like that, and the full game, which are 2 hours or around there, does leave that 1 hour spot, right? The 1 hour game is something that I don't have too many of. I've got some for sure, but it's definitely a room for more. And Furnace is a 1 hour engine builder, and I don't think I have anything like that. I mean, I guess to some small degree, I think of the Bloody Inn. The Bloody Inn is kind of an engine builder in a weird way. It's kind of a cannibalize your own engine builder game that plays in about that amount of time. But Furnace is really, really interesting. I was amazed at how many tough choices you have in a really short just 4-round game. The idea is we each start with one industrialist, which gives you a special ability, and one starting industrial card. And the industrial card for all of them is some variation of get points by trading in these resources and trade in these resources to upgrade another card, right? Then 8 cards will be dealt out into the center in a 4-player game, and each player has 4 bidding tokens, a number 1 token, 2 token, 3 token, and 4 token, and we take turns putting 1 token on 1 card. You can never put 2 of your own tokens on the same card, nor can you put the same number on a card that is already on that card, and you are bidding for taking these cards. But if you do not get the card, there are resources at the top of each card, and conversions, resources and or conversions at the top of each card. And when you lose those auctions, you get those resources at the top of the card. And if I lose with a 1, so for instance, if at the top of the card it said 2 coal, if I lose it with a 1 and somebody's going to take the card with a 3 and I lose it because I put a 1 token on there, guess what? I get 2 coal. If I lose it with a 2, guess what? I get 4 coal, and so on and so forth. It's one of these games where you find yourself plotting how to lose plenty of things so that you get the things necessary to feed the things that you win, right? Which is a very interesting mechanism. It's a very, very good, super tight, lots of really tough choices. And essentially what you're doing is you're adding elements to a system, right? You're adding cards to you're adding resources to your pool, and you're adding cards to your production line, your assembly line, as it were. And this card is going to give me 2 steel. This card after that, it converts 1 steel into 4 coins up to 2 times, so I can turn in the steel that way, and so on and so forth. And some of these things are, one is like a steel and an oil. You can trade those in. And oil is not something that just comes to you in the game. It's always something that you have to take other resources and convert them into oil. But those sorts of transactions will yield 6 or even 7 coins per time that you trigger that. Really, really fun game. I was shocked at how, I always love it when there's a game with a really simple rule set that just immediately clicks and you're just like, oh God, this is fun. This is really interesting. Tough choices. And in 1 hour, you're done and you're moving on to the next thing. That's pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoy Furnace. I played it quite a bit. I'd say I got at least a good 10, 15 plays in, kind of like in the middle of the pandemic there online. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it as well. It's nice.
Are you done with it, or is it something that if it was to come out again at the gaming table, I'm just thinking of situations where somebody's stuck in traffic and they're probably not going to be here for 45, 50 minutes. How about we play this while we're waiting, right?
Yeah, I would never turn that down. It's very simple rule set, but yeah, very interesting. Your engine's always going to be a little bit different. How you convert things, I think the little powers are actually seem pretty balanced.
Yeah,
from my experience.
Jennifer was saying that she felt that they were imbalanced, but thus far, I can't tell how. They seem to be pretty okay right now. So yeah. We'll see. Time will tell.
Right.
There'll always be a way to make adjustments to that, make a little house rules if it feels imbalanced. But yeah, so far I think they've been pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think you like this game in particular, but my all-time favorite hour-long game that's meaty, I wouldn't call it a filler, is Glass Road.
I like Glass Road. I do. I like Glass Road. It's just I don't love it to the degree that you love it. I know that you have a passion that burns that burns supernova for that particular game, and I'm like, look, I like it. It's good. But, look, I don't have the Uwe Rosenberg tattoo, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a fan. You know, I'll carry a card for him, but I'm not gonna tattoo on on my eyeball. So. But yeah, that's another great hour-long game. You know, and last night we went on to play Babylonia right afterwards. So Furnace and Babylonia, 2 1-hour games in a row, and we had a blast. It was just really, really fun. So yeah, keep an eye out for Furnace. I think it's definitely something worth checking out for people. And who knows, we might have a review for it in the future. Let's get to it. The title is Castles of Burgundy. The original title, of course, Die Burgen von Burgund, which is really funny, right? It's like in German, Burgundy and castle are kind of the same word. Die Burgen von Burgund. The designer is Stefan Feld. The artists are Julian Delval and the amazing Harold Lieske. And the publisher is it's published by Alea or Ravensburger, depending on what part of the world that you are in. Elder, do you want to walk us through what Castles of Burgundy is and how it plays?
Sure. I mean, it's really interesting because, like, you know, coming back to it again, I got like another perspective on the game, which is really interesting to me.
Ooh,
but I'm really
interested to hear this.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah. Really, what I got last night is that it's really, I mean, it's a drafting game, right? It's a tile drafting game.
100%.
You have your own player board, and I think this was the first game. Like I remember, like looking at the date, 2011. Wow, so it's a decade ago. I remember distinctly when this came out at the con, and like I just played it, nonstop when it first came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like, having, you have a player mat, and it's, this kind of like hexagon shape, and it has these different, basically types of building tiles that you can draft. And, the rules are relatively simple or the mechanics anyway, and that on your turn, you roll 2 dice, and those 2 dice can kind of determine, what you can do, or I guess how you can do the different actions, which mostly revolve around you take these tiles that are in this pool on this central board. Mm-hmm. So you're taking the tile first. It's a 2-step process. First, you have to take it to your personal board in a little area where you can only have a maximum of 3 of these tiles, and then on your next action, which it could happen on your same turn, you could use 2 dice to do this, right? Like you take 1 dice to take the tile, and then another dice to place it in your, what do they call it, village, right?
Yeah. I think your territory, really. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So when you place it there, different things happen, all kinds of different effects, depending on what type of tile it is, right? Like if there's a ship that does something, a mine gives you continuous, income once you place it. And then there's this component, which is very important in the game, where you want to kind of complete sections. Your own personal player board is divvied up into these sections of colors. Yes. And so you want to complete colors because you get bonus points for each time you complete one, and it starts out at the maximum number of points, and then there's 5 rounds in the game.
Yeah. And quickly drops off.
Yeah, and then it goes down each time. So then I think the game, there's several different kind of things I think you need to keep your eye on as you're building, but one of them is there's the yellow tiles. Many of them, some of them give you special powers during the game, which are pretty powerful. And then other ones give you victory points, in-game victory points, for having certain types of buildings or conditions on your player board. Exactly. And so, you just, one of the things of the game is that you don't know what tiles are going to be coming out. And in what order. And so you're kind of like, there's a bit of a gambling aspect to, like, should I wait for better animals to come out, or this certain scoring tile, or this certain building that I want, or do I just kind of go for the points now and then free up, my actions for something else to come along?
Yeah. So the hexagon that you have in front of you is 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 by 4, right? So each edge of it is 4 hexes long. And the colors represent terrain types, right? So there'll be 2 bunches of water, blue tiles, right? And that's boats go onto those tiles. There'll be 2 sections of dark green, which are the forests and castles. The eponymous castles of Burgundy are the ones that go on that. There are light green sort of pastures where animal tiles will go onto those. There are sort of plain tiles where buildings are going to go onto those, and each type has its own. Each type requires its own thing. And as Elder is saying, you get points for filling up these areas, but you also get points for just placing a lot of these different types of buildings as well. This is probably one of the original point salad games in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is kind of cool. I mean, there's so many different things that are happening. And listen, we said roll dice. You roll dice, and those dice dictate what you can do. Well, not really, because being a Euro game designer, Stefan Feld gives you many, many, many options to change your fate, right? There are, I think, ore that you get from the mines is one way to get tiles that you can't otherwise access. You have these little men that you can get through various means, and they allow you to adjust the die +1 or -1. So over the course of the game, you can get a lot of men and have a real flexibility in terms of what those dice end up reading in order to put things where you want them to be, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's also like one of the I think tasty decisions in the game is, do I want to, because you can always instead of taking one of your dice for an action, you could always just instead of taking an action, you can just get 2 workers, which can adjust die later on. And so, but every time you do that, that's like you're kind of losing an action for placing or taking a tile or doing something else, selling goods. And so it's like, okay, well, you want to give yourself some flexibility, but how much? And then it's always in relationship to what the other players are doing.
Yeah.
So,
and there's so many races in the game. There's literally so many different ways that you're racing. You're racing to be the first to fill up a blue section or every color. There is a race to fill up one of those sections. There is a race. The blues also give you other advantages. That there's a race to stay ahead of everyone else in that category. The buildings that come out are unique. Or relatively unique, I should say. That there are that each building tile is kind of its own thing, or almost its own thing. And when you get one of those, if there's one that gives you a power that you really, really want, boy, oh boy, you're going to be racing to grab that, because if you don't get it, somebody else might. I love the pastures. The pastures have these little pictures of animals on them, and you count up the little animals in each pasture, and what you're doing is you're literally, like, if you have 3 pastures and they all have pigs in them, you add up the total number of pigs in all of the pastures, and that's points for you. So there's a huge difference between the 4 chicken and the 2 pig field, and sometimes the 2 pig field is the one you want because I don't have any other chickens, and they're kind of additive, right? I think that's. I think that's absolutely adorable. That drives me crazy. It's so cute.
Yeah.
You want to talk about trading goods, because that's another aspect of the game that we didn't really get into.
Yeah. So you mentioned the ships before. So as the trade goods also kind of act as a game clock. Because the active player is rolling this dice, the white die, and then that trade good comes down into that section. And so when you're using your die to take a tile, you can either take the I guess the land tile that's there, but you could also have the choice of, well, actually that's not how the game works, right? Like it's when you use the ship tile,
yes,
that determines when you take the tiles. So you take the tiles, and then you have them on your board. You can have the 3 different types.
Yep.
You can stack those types. I think you're allowed to hold up to 3
of each type. Yeah.
Of each type. And so again, that becomes another one of these races in the game where it's like, okay, well, I want to get these particular goods, and do I want to sell them sooner to make more room for something else? Am I going for, do I have the special tile that awards me points for selling different types of goods, or do I just want to maximize as many of the goods, selling them on the action as I can? So ideally, each time you sell, you want to get the maximum, which would be 3.
Yeah. So the ships give you these goods that you can turn in for points. The mines give you ore that you can use to buy these extra tiles that are in the center of the central game board that you can't choose using the dice. You have to buy using ore. The the yellow tiles give you special game advantages that only that one tile does. Like it gives you points for this type of building, or it gives you an ability to swap trade goods, or all sorts of things like that. We already talked about the pastures and what they do. You're counting up the animals and they're scoring points. Each and every type of tile has its own set of rules and its own little mini game. So you end up playing, it's kind of 8 little mini games, and yet, I mean, describing it would sound to me chaotic and random and and a mishmash, but it doesn't. It plays completely as one game where you're trying to weigh these very, very different tiles that do very different things and trying to figure out where the greatest advantage is for this current turn in the conditions as they are presented right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's like that tension that because the tiles don't refill right away, right? They
right.
Each round they refill like after the, what is it, five turns?
Yeah.
Are in a round. And so your choices are getting worse and worse as the round progresses, and all the juicy tiles are being taken. And so you're like, okay, well, what do I do with these remaining turns?
Yeah. And sometimes you can look around and see, oh, guess what? I need blank tile. Nobody else needs it. I think I'm going to be able to. That's the one I'm going to leave for last. I need it pretty badly, but guess what? I need the mine, but guess what? Your mines are already all full. You can't even take it.
Right.
That's a great situation.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, there was never a game like this before, and there kind of has never been a game like this after.
Nope.
What is it about this game? Because it's so good and it works so well. Why was this not a game? I mean, I guess point salad games in general became something popular, so there were outgrowths of this game, but the basics of this game itself have never really been replicated. You can't really point. I can't point, or I can't think of anyway, any game that owes a huge amount to the specificity of how this game is organized. Why do you think that is? Do you think, was this just so ahead of its time that people couldn't take the same lessons and apply them, or what do you think it is about this game?
I'm not sure. It's like because it does mix a couple different things. I mean, like I said, it's what I really saw in my recent play was that it's really this tile drafting.
Yeah. and tile laying and a little bit of area control, right? In the sense that you're racing to fill up areas before other players.
Right.
Which is a weird area.
But it's also like the placing of tiles, often gives you these other special actions as well.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Which I have seen that component. Like I feel like in a lot of games where okay, like I'm placing a tile and I, or a die or something like that, and then I'm taking an action,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like kind of like a unique blend of mechanics where, unlike when, whatever was the first official, what is it? Not drafting, deck building.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And you got this whole slew of different deck building games that came out. And then, dice drafting got hot, and then, there's lots of, games that have dice drafting. But yeah, this special blend of mechanics I haven't really seen replicated in another, theme or design, or it doesn't even seem like something that really he's gone back to in particular.
Yeah, I mean, he has in the point salad sense, in the sense that when you look at games like Trajan, Trajan is just a big board that has 8 little mini games on that board, and you're trying to figure out with your limited actions which of these am I going to do, and is the benefit of taking this one versus this one better for me and worse for my opponents than anything else. But even Trajan, and I love Trajan. I think it's a great game. It doesn't have there's something just ineffably elegant about this game, right? There's something just kind of compact and simple, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's an easy game to teach, really, right? It's a there's a lot to figure out and a lot to parse. Right. And I definitely think it's one of those games that even with the best teach in the world, your first game is just getting your footing, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it is definitely a game that I think is tremendously influential, even though there is not a lot of games like it, which is a really interesting quandary, right? An interesting thing to say and to look at. I can't recommend it more highly. This is if you had to say what are the 10 most influential games of Euros of all time, it would be hard to imagine that Castles of Burgundy isn't on that list.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. This is, again, partially because it is so unique. It is kind of, Feld in his prime, It's just one of those games that I think if you're really into Euros, then you definitely got to try this game out.
100%. That's Castles of Burgundy. It's a game that I can't say more good things about. It is a game that I think you must experience at some point. And guess what? It is on BGA right now in a great. I mean, I thought the implementation was fantastic, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. It works really well. And again, it's like, part of the getting used to the game, or the learning curve is knowing what all the buildings do. Yes. So being able to hover over and see the descriptions is like really helpful.
100%, yeah, because that is one of the few drawbacks to the actual physical game. Mm-hmm. Is that each building has this tiny. I mean, the numbers could not be smaller on the yellow tiles. And you gotta look each and every one up and see what that does. I mean, I would say half of them, the iconography tells you exactly what it is, right. But there's another half of it where it's like, what is that? And you have to look them up. And the fact that you don't have to do that in BGA is invaluable. I've had so many great plays of this. How many resources are there in this game, Elder?
Not a tremendous amount, but
I mean, I guess.
But it feels like there
each
are.
trade good is a resource.
Yeah,
maybe
it doesn't.
Maybe not in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at each type of tile as a different resource. You got the money.
Yeah, and the ore. And yeah, and the little men, the plus
Right,
one,
the
minus one.
workers.
Yep,
Yeah,
the workers.
it
Yeah,
might be a good 10 or
I
so.
think
It's close.
I think it's probably a 10 resource game. It's not quite in your sweet spot, but it's getting there. And this is the game that kind of exploded that idea that, oh, guess what? We can have all these different little mini mechanisms that are interlocking, and that really exploded the a lot of resource games. It came out of that sort of thing. I guess the weird thing is that Feld really isn't a resource guy, right? That's more of a Rosenberg thing.
Yeah, I would say it's more. He's more, I think, known for point salad.
Yeah.
And yeah, Uwe's known more for resources and this idea of like combining resources to make other things.
100%.
Yeah. It is ranked Feld's number one game on BGG currently.
What's it ranked at right
now? Castles of Burgundy.
Right.
And I think the overall rank, it looks like, is 15.
15, yes, and 14 for strategy. Yeah, it is a top 20 game. No question about it. No question about it. I'm sure you've heard of the game if you've never played it. Check it out on BGA, and then when you fall in love with it, as we have, go out and buy it. Copies are not very expensive. Definitely worth your time. Castles of Burgundy. All right, we're to our member segment now. Elder, we're going to be talking about forgotten classics. Now, you and I, we had a conversation recently where we were talking about when we got into the hobby, and we figured out that we came in at almost the exact same moment. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like right around 2001 to 2002 or so.
Yeah, right around there.
Yep.
For me, I had been playing Settlers of Catan for a while. I had gotten that game and played it for a couple of years, and then I was like, well, gee, I wonder if there's anything more. And I do not remember how I found out about the first SoCal Games Day, but I think the SoCal Games Days were my gateway to the larger world and the larger community. And I think at my very first one, I think you were there. I'm pretty sure Jennifer was there. I'm pretty sure I played games with both of you.
Yeah. I had a similar introduction in that. Well, I was always into board games, and this was right around when the internet was getting big as well. And I just remember doing a internet search, for board games to see what will pop up, and I stumbled across what was it? The main website,
PGG, Board Game
Geek.
Yeah,
BoardGameGeek.com, right?
I can remember the day I discovered BGG. Like, it was this. I've never before had quite that experience of discovering a hidden world that I knew nothing about.
I feel the same way, dude. It was like all of a sudden my mind was blowing. I was just like, whoa! I love board games, but these people on here on some whole other ish, right? So
yeah.
I was like, wow. And then I immediately thought, okay, well, they're into it on a whole nother level than I am. Mm-hmm. They have all these lists on here, these top 10 lists. So I'm like, I wonder what their number one game is. And I went to it, and the number one game at the time was Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I think I was the same way. I think that right when that game was coming out was when I entered the hobby, because I went to that first games day, and every table had Puerto Rico on it. I think there was like one or two tables that had something different.
Yep. And I just remember like looking at the pictures and being like, oh, well, there's no central board, and there's these roll cards and resource. Oh, my introduction to resources right there.
Yeah, right. And people were writing reviews, and they were ranking the games. They were talking about the game they played and making little reports. And I was like, this site is unbelievable. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I was going through the list of games, and I'm like, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. And this is before the hobby really took off still. This is still in its early days, but there was still so much out there. Yep.
Yeah. And again, similarly, I know how I I found SoCal Games Day was one of the few places where you could buy Euro games at the time. Was I think it was called the Gamekeeper shop, which were these like hobby, like specialty hobby stores at the time that had a small collection of Euros,
right?
And later on they got acquired by Wizards of the Coast and became these Wizards of the Coast stores.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I remember there was one in the mall, and they had a flyer for SoCal Games Day on the counter, and that's where I went there, and that's the person who was kind of like my ambassador was Mike Nikoloff, from Game Night.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mike Nikoloff.
Yeah,
it comes to my Friday game nights rather, and yeah, he's been a pretty regular recently. He's our newest addition, and he's fantastic, man. That guy knows so much about games.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mike's great, and just super nice, and really introduced me to a lot of my favorite people in the hobby. Introduced me to Jen. Again, I think we were hovering around each other. I don't think me and you met until a little bit later on. At the Strategicon, and I think Jen probably introduced us.
Oh, I think that's probably true. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh man, those were. I mean, looking back, those were amazing days, right? Because you're walking into these environments with these people that. There was a buzz because everyone knew this was something new, right? It wasn't a hobby that had a ton of stuff going on, but it was just starting to become popular, and everyone felt like they were in on some secret, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then, what helped that, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but, these were still the days where a lot of these games, didn't have U.S. publishers.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to play them, you had to get translations of the rules and download them on these, Word documents that you have to, stash in the box,
And yeah, and you would find out that of what new games are coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And we would all go together we would go in on a crate.
Yeah.
Right. We would put together, like, somebody said, okay, I'm ordering a crate from Europe. Put in your order. We have this much space, so it can hold roughly this many games, and and that it's wild to think about it these days, but that's what you had to do, and you would get these. I still have tons of games in my game collection that I'm probably never going to get rid of. That it is German. It is German on the box. It's German inside, and I have a little printout that I did years and years ago of the English translate and some horrible translations too of the rules of people just trying to work their way through it, because sometimes you'd be lucky and you'd have a German who spoke good English and they would do great translations. It was the Americans who didn't know, or the Brits that didn't know German that well, that were trying to translate it. That's where you got into trouble. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember one time in particular, there was a game I really wanted bad and I didn't want to wait. And so I found somebody on, a Board Game Geek page that said they were going to Essen and they were bringing some games. And, I paid them, and then I met them at a seedy hotel, near LAX.
You're getting from your dealer. Yeah.
and went to their room, and they opened up this suitcase that had all these games in it and gave me my game. It was so trippy.
Oh my God! Yeah, I get my games through Jeffrey. He's the architect who works with. I can't remember, but anyway, he was really good because he had it down. He had a whole system and a spreadsheet and everything like that, and that was amazing. But listen, a lot of those games that we played back then, a few have stood the test of time. Like, I will play El Grande any day, any time, and that was. That was even from 7 years before we got in the hobby.
Right.
And it was still on tables. I can remember it still being on tables and played a lot when we were, there. And there's a bunch of others. It's weird, the games that stick with you.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do today is we're going to go through, I think we each have a list of 8 games that were played all the time in those early days, like things we just played and played and played, and they just they don't really make it to the table anymore. And we'll talk about, I mean, I think this probably will be, part of it will be reminiscing, but part of it might be, here's why I don't really want to play this anymore, or I really want to play this some more. Let's try to figure out a time to get it to the table, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Totally.
Depending on the game. And again, hopefully this will be, kind of spur some of our listeners to, go and seek out some of these kind of old classics and, give them another kind of take or reason on why they should try it out if they haven't played it before.
Oh, 100%. I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
All right. So do you want to go first?
Sure. So again, the first one on my list is Puerto Rico.
Sure.
Again, blew me away when I saw this game. Just the whole idea of having roles, everybody having their own individual player board was just blowing my mind at the time. I remember going to Strategic Con and having, I don't know, it was like a maybe 10, 12 table Puerto Rico tournament. It's like everybody was playing this game at the time.
Oh yeah.
So totally fond memories of Puerto Rico. I guess over the years it's gotten a rap because I guess it got played so much that there's certain moves that you're not supposed to make.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because you can't set somebody else up. And the whole turn order thing got kind of a little crazy. So, probably not a game I would typically play these days.
Except that maybe
but
people
still
don't
very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people don't know these tricks anymore, right? I mean, it was like, it was probably, my guess is, it might have been number one on Board Game Geek for the longest period of time of any game, possibly.
Yeah.
Because it was on there for years. It was number one, right? It took a long time for it to be unseated, and yeah, you're right. People studied it like chess, right? I mean, I remember Alex Frog, one of the all-time great posters on Board Game Geek, did these huge, like 10-page, 20-page analyses of starting situations and what order to do things in, and which building is worth more than which building, but. It was one of those games that people started to take really, really seriously and try and break down, and that might have removed some of the fun out of it. But I do remember that was definitely the game of the day when I started too. And the thing I remember that was the coolest about it was that there wasn't one way to win. That you can win with building in the city. You can win shipping corn, right? There's the shipping strategy and the building strategy, and which one do you have? And then occasionally I would see people win with a hybrid, like in between the two, and I was like, how do you do that? That's amazing. And up until that point, Monopoly, all the games we used to play, there's not multiple ways to win. There's one way. There's one way to win, and that kind of drag the game down. But yeah, so would you say that Puerto Rico is a game that you would like to play more, or do you think that for people that have never played it, they should absolutely play it, but maybe it's not something that we're going to go back to?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I would go back to it with any regularity. I wouldn't be against playing it, just for kind of nostalgia's sake. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's been so many other kind of like new games. Although, like we said about the other game you mentioned earlier, which I forget what we were referring to, but like
Amun-Re, I think.
No, we were saying that there was another game that like there's not. Oh, the one we reviewed, Castles of Burgundy.
Oh, of course.
Like there hasn't been another game quite like it. Like yes. I think a couple of games have attempted to do this kind of role, pick a role and everyone turn and have everybody else do it.
Yeah.
But nothing really pulled it off like how Puerto Rico did it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. It's singular. It's one of a kind.
Yeah.
So you gave me your list of 8, and then I came up with a list of 8, and I wanted to come up with 8 different games.
Yeah.
The reality is that if I did a list and I didn't look at your list, half of your list would be my list. So
yeah,
we'll put that as the caveat. I'm going to talk about a 1998 game that was getting a lot of play in 2002, 2001, 2002, Through the Desert, which is a Reiner Knizia game where you are building caravans of camels across the desert. And it's this, first of all, it's not a filler, but it's probably a 1 hour game, right? It's not as long as the other ones. So people would play that when they were waiting for people to come, or they wanted to play a game through lunch while other people went out to eat and things like that. And that was a great game to get out. And really, at the end of the day, it's kind of multiplayer Go. It really is about blocking off space, creating patterns where you're surrounding people and making lines between the things that are valuable and score in the game. And I just remember playing that. I had played Go as a kid. I had played a little bit of Go, never enough to be any good whatsoever. But I remembered it made an impression on me. And then when I saw that, I was like, oh man. Whoever designed this, I had no idea who Reiner Knizia was, but I said, whoever designed this really knows what they're doing. That was amazing. And I think that's still a game. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I definitely played, this game, but was never really a fan of it. Like, I remember hitting the table, just never really, floated my boat. Although Reiner Knizia, who was probably the hottest designer, if not the hottest, definitely one of the hottest Euro designers at the time. He was my first favorite designer. I mean, I just kind of loved most of the stuff that he did.
Yeah, we played Babylonia this week, so we're still playing his games. It's amazing. For me, I would still play Through the Desert. I would still play anybody says Through the Desert. 100% buy-in. I want to play it. I'll play it immediately. And I also think it's a really good game because to give to newer gamers, right? To people that are really new to the hobby, because it's super easy to teach how to play, and the gameplay becomes evident. Like, the teach is like 2 minutes long, and a third of the way through the game, you just get that look. People get that look on their face, like, "Oh, I get it. I see what this is." It's really, really cool. So, big fan of that one. What's your next one?
Yeah, so my next one, sticking with Knizia, is Tigris and Euphrates. Oh. So this game came out a few years before. This was in '97. But again, I don't think. I mean, I don't know how big this game. I don't think it ever got as big as Puerto Rico. But I think I discovered it around the same time frame, and definitely could always find people that wanted to play it.
Yeah.
Just thought this was like a really interesting design. Again, this was part of, I started to notice a pattern here. Like, there's this one guy that's creating these really interesting games that I seem to like that are, these Euros, and this was definitely one of them.
100%. Yeah, Tigris and Euphrates, I think, was the number 2 game on Board Game Geek back when we started. Right, number 1 was Puerto Rico, number 2 was Tigris and Euphrates, and I think Tigris and Euphrates had been number 1 and was supplanted by Puerto Rico or something along those lines. Yeah. I mean, Babylonia owes something to Tigris and Euphrates. It's got some. First of all, the region obviously is the same, but it has some similarities in play. It's sort of like a stripped down, simplified version of it. But I just remember that was the first tough teach I ever had, right? Because there was the internal conflict versus external conflict.
Yeah.
Right. And figuring out the difference between those and just, it was one of those that I had to sort of fight my way through, and eventually, I'm not sure who taught me the game. Might have been John, but he said, "Listen, let's play around and you'll get the sense." It doesn't really have rounds, but he said, he's just meaning let's get the game started, and I think you'll pick it up. And sure enough, it sure did. Yeah.
Yeah, and the rules aren't super intuitive for that one. It is one of those where, if you haven't played in a while, you do kind of have to relearn it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely got this kind of just real classic feel to it, and definitely classic Knizia.
100%. 100%. My next one was the first game that had a board presence that blew me away, and that was Tikal.
Yeah.
1999, it came out, so it had been out a few years, but a bunch of people had copies. They were all, copies from Europe, and it's this game where you Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, who just did Paris right now, and Kiesling is did Azul, and Kramer did. These guys are just other huge designers that are working hard, making great games to this day. This one is, you have action points. You have a certain number of action points to spend. And you can spend them any way you want. Like, you can go and explore in the jungle. You can clear out the brush and reveal another level of these pyramids. These Aztec or Mayan. I want to say Aztec, but it's Tikal. So it's in Guatemala. No, it's not in Guatemala. Yeah, it is in Guatemala. Anyway, it's in Guatemala. It's near the border with Belize, and it's a stunning place to visit. They're still digging things out. Tikal was used in the original Star Wars movie. In A New Hope, it was where the secret rebel base was on Yavin. So in the game, what you're doing is you're uncovering levels of these pyramids, and what you're doing is you're taking smaller sections of pyramid and adding them on top of the ones beforehand. So the game literally is growing before your eyes. You're literally seeing these pyramids getting taller and taller, and I just thought, oh my God, that is amazing.
Yeah, and then I'm looking on the Geek right now, and there's I guess they did an updated version of it.
Really?
Where the table presence is even better, because the temples were represented by these kind of like thin pieces of cardboard, which were cool. But in this version, they actually have like very thick stone. Like, there's a substantial pyramid that gets built on the board as you play the game. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It just felt very Indiana Jonesy. You're finding these ancient idols, and you're trying to match them up, and you're doing set collection is really what it is. But I didn't know what that word was back then.
Yeah, and this was the first game that I can remember playing where it had this new mechanism I never knew about, which was these action points where you could really decide what your turn was going to look like based on what you spent your points on.
Which is weird. Weird that there are no action point games anymore, because I think it's a very flexible. It's a really flexible mechanism that could be used for a lot of different things.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. You're next.
Let me see. What's my next one? My next one is another Kinesia, which is Amun-Re.
Yep.
Which I introduced to my family over vacation this year down in Mexico. I got them all to play a late night game of Amun-Re, and I think they loved it for the most part. I think they had a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's
great.
It's another great looking
game.
Yeah, and it looks great too. It's got those little pyramids that you're putting out, and we're in the pyramid section of our game. I guess back then that was the historical theme was really, really popular.
Right. Yep.
Totally. My next one actually is Alhambra, which was the first card-based game that I had. The card and tile game, and if you haven't played Alhambra, strangely enough, at church today, do you remember my friend Melanie comes to game nights every now and then? Anyway, her mom was in town, and her mom was reintroduced to me, didn't remember me, and then she said, "Oh, this is Tom. Oh my goodness, we were playing Alhambra the other day, and I had a question." And she starts asking me this Alhambra like strategy question, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! I had no idea." Like a decade ago, I taught them Alhambra. They loved it. They bought it, and to this day, that's a family thing that they do, which is amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, Alhambra's this great game where you're getting cards in order to buy tiles. and there are 4 different colors of cards representing 4 different monies, and you can't spend, you can't use any old money for any card. You have to use specific things to get these tiles. And I just thought, oh my God, it was such a great brain burner. I have the big box now, which has all of the expansions. I don't know if any of the expansions are things that I'm like, oh, I have to play with that.
Right.
But nonetheless, Basic Alhambra is just such a good game, and a really good game for new gamers too.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever played an expansion, but I do remember loving Alhambra. Like, I have very fond memories of playing that game. It's like, it is a little, you have to think in the game for sure, but I don't feel like it's a real brain burner,
No.
And there is something very pleasing about building your own, Alhambra. I just thought of it. It's kind of a
spiritual
ancestor to, something like Mad King Ludwig.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you're building this kind of unique thing each time to get a certain amount of points, and just that, we've talked about this before, just that feeling that you get of having your own unique thing that you build in front of you.
Totally.
Is something that's kind of pleasurable when you're playing.
100%. What's your next one?
Let's go to Reef Encounter.
Oh.
Yeah. So Reef Encounter, Alex Breeze, 2004, this game came out. Definitely never had played a game like this before. Just this whole idea of, like, I just remember dropping these tiles into this, these little cardboard boxes, and kind of like secret hidden points, and
super weird looking game, right? It looked like nothing like we'd ever seen.
Yeah, totally. It was completely unique. I remember. I think this was also like one of the most expensive games I ever bought, because I had to have a copy, and I think I remember paying $80 online for my copy, and it was. The game went out of print.
Yeah, it was impossible to find.
Run.
I still have my original edition of that game, and every single time when I'm trying to cull down my collection, I look at it and I say, I can't quit you. I haven't played you in years, but I can't quit you. I love that game. It's secretly what it actually is, right? Is a stock market game when you get down to it.
Yep.
With just a really crazy theme.
Right. Yeah. This, like, again, never saw a theme like this before, where it's like you're building, coral reef, and having it be, and what is it, trying to get fish to come and eat it. And, it's worth a certain amount of points. And I just thought it was wild. But totally just remember having great times playing Reef Encounter.
Oh, I would love to play that game again. We got to get that out to the table.
Yeah, this is one of those that I feel like is worth kind of revisiting to see, how it holds up now.
Totally.
After all these years, yeah.
Totally. I got another one on the table presence side of things. Carcassonne. When I would go to these game days, there would always be somebody playing Carcassonne. They were kind of the lighter gamers at the game session. But man, talk about tile laying into a work of beauty.
Yeah,
it's this beautiful, bucolic French countryside that you're building with little towns and little inns and fields and castles, and it's almost like you're building a jigsaw puzzle that doesn't tell you what you have to do. You can put it together almost any way. And then just these simple little rules for, you have these meeples, and if you put them down, on their side, they're farmers in the field, and then they score a certain way. If you put them up in a castle, then they're, soldiers, and they work a different way. I just thought that it was such a gorgeous, gorgeous game, and a really kind of tranquil experience. I really loved Carcassonne, and to this day, I bring it out for young kids. Where we play a very simplified version of the rules, but they just love putting those pieces out and building the landscape, building a whole land in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one where probably a little on the light side for me. Although I definitely have enjoyed playing games of Carcassonne before, and never really like. Again, this is one of those true Euro classics, right? That's just one of those. Like, I mean, there's a handful of games that kind of really, I think, broke into the U.S. consciousness and like even started showing up in like traditional board game stores like Target and Toys R Us and stuff like that.
100%.
Catan is one, and this one. But yeah, so many expansions, and yeah, it's just one of those like just real classics.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
What you got next?
My next one will be Princes of Florence.
Oh.
Man, yeah. Yeah, love this game. Again, when I played it, hadn't played anything like it before. The mechanisms that are in there, the meta that evolves when you have a table of people who really know the game, because there's bidding involved, and so
don't let them get the gesture for less than 1,000 florin.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I just remember having conversations with people who, were more kind of accounting, programming, math inclined, and had kind of, come up with some system for what each element was worth.
Yeah.
in terms of bidding, like as the game progressed, like on each row. Well, yeah, a jester is only worth this on round 1, but on round 3 it's worth this, and I'm just like, oh wow, like okay.
This was my favorite game back in the day.
Yeah.
During those early days, this was my absolute number one game. First of all, it's got a polyomino thing, right? It's you have a little villa, and you're putting buildings in that villa, and you also have gardens and lakes and forests and all that sort of stuff, and the shapes have to kind of fit with one another. And in addition to that, you're bidding for these, for these various attributes that are going to please the great men of the day, the great people of the day that you want to attract to your site, which I thought was a fantastic theme, right?
Yeah, it is, and again, not something that I've seen. Like I know I've toyed around with wanting to, because I think it's such a brilliantly designed game.
Yeah,
with kind of taking that same kind of theme and kind of repurposing it and kind of updating or changing around the mechanics a bit, but never could quite figure out a way to do it effectively. But yeah, definitely a brilliant game. And this happens to be one of those that like, yeah, I'll pretty much play it anytime. Like if we're trying to figure out a game and can't think of anything, and somebody says Princess of Florence, like, yeah, I'll play Princess of Florence.
I am 100% in the same camp. I will always play Princess of Florence.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the other Princess game that came out when we were getting into the hobby, Princess of the Renaissance. This was kind of my first Martin Wallace game, and it has the ugliest board you're ever going to see in games. It's just awful. And it impressed upon me that, these people are basically making these games in their garage, right? So some of them, you got Rio Grande, you got people doing some higher end stuff, but a lot of people are just making these games any way they can and getting them out there. And it was one of those games that I realized, games can be things you have to study, because there were all these tiles in the game. There were the members of the various families, and you're bidding to get these tiles, and you're just trying to figure out which ones are worth what and what's the right way to value them. And unlike a lot of the other games, it wasn't played so heavily that people had studied it out. Like there weren't huge files online where you could see what people had agreed was the right bid for these things, especially because in that game, the value depended so much on the way the game was going. There were just so many other factors. It was really hard to determine, and it was a brutal game. Like a lot of Martin Wallace's stuff, it was just mean. I did love that game.
Yeah, this is one that I don't think I've ever played this game before. I've definitely seen it and heard of it.
Interesting.
But yeah, I As far as Martin Wallace games, don't think. I don't know. I don't think I'm typically a fan of his stuff, but there's definitely a few of his games that stick out to me as ones that I have liked and would like to play.
I forgive you, Elder. I forgive you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got? What's your next?
All right. My next one is now you might not have ever played this one or heard of it. Let's see, Fifth Avenue.
I have never played Fifth Avenue. I've seen it. I've seen it on tables, but I've never played it.
Yeah, this is a super interesting game that I highly recommend you at least trying out at some point. I have a copy, 2004 game. I don't think I had a famous designer or anything. The Geek, I remember there was some kind of like fatal flaw in the game that, people kind of were like, okay, well, this game doesn't really work or it's broken. Which, it's arguable, but the game is very interesting. You're collecting these cards of different colors, and there are these kind of these pawns. They're like inspectors or councilmen or something that are moving through the city of New York, at the time where they were building the skyscrapers. And so you're kind of bidding to build certain numbers of your skyscrapers in these different plots. And then there's some kind of like multiplier mechanic. And then there's the Central Park region where you want to get some buildings in there as well, because they're worth, some other different separate points.
It sounds really good.
Yeah, it's a really cool bidding game, and it has some kind of like chicken involved, and there's like this special mechanic where there's certain of your cards, your cards are like 4, 5s, and 6s, but depending on your bid, like you can't use in your bid certain cards further in the bidding. Like the lower cards, you can put more buildings down, but the higher cards, like the 6, you could only, if you win with 6s in your bid, you can only put one skyscraper down, which is not an optimal move.
Interesting.
So,
I like that mechanic. That's interesting.
Very interesting mechanics. And then there's this whole thing about having luxury items next to your buildings, and has a couple of things where you can shut down a region where all the buildings like are not going to be worth any points at the end of the game. It's like it can be like a real kind of take that, but yeah, really, really interesting mechanics and a unique gameplay that I haven't seen anywhere else.
Cool. I might have to check that out. My next one is Power Grid. That came out about 2 years after we came into the hobby, and I remember the day when I come to a games day, and I had already heard about this. I was in the pipeline. I knew what was going on. And at these games days, some people would have Funkenschlag. They would have the German edition because the English edition wasn't coming out yet. And I can remember when there were just table after table after table of people playing a Power Grid. And when I sat down and played my very first game, I was like, oh, it was my first instant classic. I was like, first play, I'm like, oh, this is how bidding on these makes sense, and then putting down your buildings, and then there are 3 phases, so you can come back, you can build back into these cities at other points in the game. So there's timing aspect. I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah, definitely was impressed. Again, I feel like this is one of those games where by the time I started playing it, people, there was a certain level of play that was beyond me. So it was like, the sharks, the the Power Grid sharks that I would play with, it was like not even worth playing. It's like, dude, you don't even have a chance.
Well, we had people like Bruce. We had people like Dave Zevin. So our group of people that we would play with, to say that we had sharks in the waters is an understatement. These are people that are renowned, like just people that will study a game to death and just crush all comers. And Power Grid, as much as Puerto Rico was in that bent, there the people would go crazy for it.
Yeah, not on my list though. But this totally also makes me think of Taj Mahal, which was out around the same time. Like I kind of remember playing Power Grid, and then Taj Mahal would be like right after, or in some order like that.
Taj Mahal is not on my list because I still actively play Taj Mahal. I would say I've played it 2 or 3 times this year. I will always bring that game out. That is one of my all-time favorite games. I absolutely adore it. It's my favorite Knizia by far.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm interested in playing that game again. And there's like a new implementation of it that just came out like a year or 2 ago too, right?
Yeah, I probably have to get that. My copy is all in German.
Got it.
What's your next?
Okay, my next one is Boomtown.
Boomtown. I only played this once. I really liked it though.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's like, it's a little on the simpler side. This is another drafting game where you're drafting these gigantic cards, most of which are mines, and it has this real, gambling aspect to it because you're rolling dice, and it does give you that kind of, feeling of being a prospector and, going for gold, right? And sometimes your mines blow up, and you want to have certain mines of different colors, so you could be the mayor, which is worth more points. And there's this very interesting money system where the choice goes one direction of the cards that are out there, but the money goes in the other direction for whoever wins the bid. And so you pay the person to your right, and then they give half the person to the next person, and then so on until there's none left around the table. So it's a bit of a closed economy in terms of like how much money it is, and of course whoever has the most money at the end is the winner.
Yeah. I do remember. I remember liking it the one time I played it, but I think I was getting into heavier games at the time.
Yep.
And I think that's why it fell by the wayside for me. Interestingly, my next one is in that vein a little bit. Louis the 14th. Do you remember that? It was a small box game that was really kind of interesting. There was a grid of famous people in the court of Louis the 14th, and you would be putting these barrels down that represented influence. You were whispering in their ears, as it were. And it was this weird geographical bidding game, because when you would put a barrel down, if you had 3 barrels to put out, they had to be linked to one another, and at the end of the round you would count them up, and whoever had the most barrels on each person would gain the favor of that famous personage. And it was a really interesting game. I still think it probably, I wonder if it holds up. I wonder how it holds up. But I remember that was just this. I thought, wow, that is a lot of game in a really small box. I thought that was really interesting. But I haven't played it in years and years and years.
Yeah, I've only played out. I never got really into it, but I definitely did play it. Around that time, and I actually don't really remember it that well. I'm looking at it right now. But yeah, one of those simpler games. I think, like you said, it's in the vein of like a Boomtown, like not a filler by any means, a pretty meaty game, but
yeah,
not one of the heavier Euros that we were probably more focused on.
Exactly. And your number 8. What is your last one?
My last one is Wildlife. You mentioned Wolfgang Kramer, and this was 2002.
Yes.
In this game, I think you're, if I remember correctly, representing these different kind of species, and you want them to grow, and certain species can eat other species, and there's some area control going on, and I just remember it was a big box game, and again, it was just this was one of the, during that time period, one of the games that just hit the table consistently. Like everybody would play Wildlife.
To this day, when Paul talks about croc strategy, it is a reference to Wildlife.
Yeah,
and it is a reference to a time when he and another friend of mine, Chuck Tolman, it was one of their first games that they ever played together, and really early on in their board game journey, when I brought out Wildlife for them, we played it, and it was a 6-player. It plays up to 6 players, so we brought it out for a big 6-player night, and for whatever reason, Chuck backstabbed Paul quite early on. And Paul was the croc, I think it was Paul was the croc, and he said, "Oh, you understand that that this will not go unanswered. And for the rest of the game, all they did with their turns was crush each other just as much as they possibly could. They were lapped possibly multiple times in the game, and this is not a game. This is a game where the scores tend to be pretty tight. They were so far back because the only thing they wanted to do was just stick fingers in each other's eyes and just eat their hearts out. And it was two species that were fighting each other for dominance, and they were both just losing horribly. I have fond memories of that wildlife game, and that was, I got to know a lot about my brother-in-law. I got to know a lot about Paul. That's part of who he is, right? He will. Yeah. If he feels wronged, all bets are off.
Yeah. The scorched earth, tactics, man. They'll be coming for you.
100%. And then my final game is Pillars of the Earth. Pillars of the Earth came out in 2006 and was one of those games where, like the books, you're building a cathedral, right? And the timer of the game is this cathedral that, for the time, it was kind of neat that you're putting up this pillar and that pillar, and here's the roof going on and all that sort of stuff, and you actually make it over time. It was a pretty cool worker placement game where you're putting out workers into all these different places because you need glass, and you need stone, and you need wood, and you need all these things in order to build the structure the way you have to. That scores the most of the points in the game, and you're even buying craftsmen and all sorts of other things in the game. It was. I think that the reason that I don't play that anymore, I still think it's a good game for people that are newer to the hobby, but I think that there's nothing that it does that something else doesn't do better. So It's a game that I'm okay leaving behind, even though for its time it was really quite good. It was really well put together. Yeah,
agreed. And again, it's got a good amount of resources in it. So I was in there.
100%.
Definitely remember enjoying this one.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's those are 16. Forgotten classic, 16 games that, I don't know, maybe you at home, maybe you play some of these games a lot. I think, from our list, I think we already identified at least 2 or 3 or 4 of these, right? I think for sure Reef Encounter, Princes of Florence, I would play those any day.
Yeah.
No question
totally.
about it. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/GameBrainPod. We have a Facebook group. We have a Discord channel. Please get in those Board Game Sommelier requests. We didn't get to do one today, but we are looking for some good ones. And you have been listening to Game Brain. Produced and edited by Matthew Robinson, Tom Donnelly, and Trey Alsop. Special thanks to Daedalus for our incredible music. More on Daedalus at GameBrainPod.com. And thanks to Edamar Peleg for our incredible graphics. You can reach us by email at contact@GameBrainPod.com or on Twitter at GameBrain_pod. Thanks for listening, and go play some games with friends or make some friends with games.